AI itself is very technology agnostic. I mean, it's just a tool which you can basically use to make decisions or predict for all the different, fields out there. You can use AI in virtually every field. Bittensor is just a tool which is trying to, make sure that the access to it or the ability to be a part of it is not confined to a few individuals, but to the whole of humanity. I remember a French philosopher, his name was René Descartes. He coined the term cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, which meant that the fact that one can think is the proof of our existence and our consciousness. What does thinking imply? That means that we have a certain intellect, we have a certain intelligence code. And the very fact that intelligence, the commodity of intelligence, is what dictates or which basically authenticates that we exist and that we are conscious, that's such a powerful narrative that anything that is trying to democratize, build upon, improve intelligence is revolutionary. Scalability is one major issue. For example, the biggest problem that I came across was people lying about what kind of compute they're providing to the network. And how do you make sure that what an individual is claiming to be is actually the processing power? So because it's very easy to fake it and to be able to authenticate the different entities or nodes on a network that are providing compute and making sure that there are no malicious actors and making sure that the specs that they are claiming are actually accurate. Problems like these, the scalability issues and authenticating and making sure that everything is working fine is something that is much easier to do on a centralized network as compared to a decentralized network. There are about $867 trillion worth of assets out there that can be tokenized. In the year 2024, the growth in in real world asset tokenization was 85%. Right now, excluding stablecoins, it stands at um, around $15 billion. Analysts expect, even World Economic Forum expects, that by 2030, and that's just 5 years ahead, the total tokenization market is going to reach $10 trillion. Now, there are different targets. I mean, some claim it's going to be 10 trillion, the others claim that it's going to be 16, 30, whatever, but that's trillion with a T. So from $15 billion, billion with a B, going to 16 or even $10 trillion, what's that? That's about 600 times growth in the next 5 years.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Dr. Fahd S. Khan, who shares his insights on the intersection of blockchain with artificial intelligence and energy systems. In this conversation, we explore the importance of blockchain in facilitating energy trading and decentralizing compute, the potential of tokenization and AGI, and the challenges of regulation, verification, and morality in these emerging fields. And now, back to Fahd with the 24th Ventura Labs podcast.
All right, Fahad, it's good to have you today. And
Thank you for having me, Grant.
yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you. Let's start with just who are you? What is your background? What's your professional history?
Well, I'm basically an engineer. I started off with my electrical engineering, went for grad school to the University of Tokyo. I worked on energy storage, even though I have a very interdisciplinary background in the sense that I usually, with an engineering background, I went for energy storage and research, particularly on the material side and catalyst side, and then trying to use those materials in the systems side as well to basically develop energy storage mechanisms. I specifically worked on uh, what we call solar fuels. That is, for example, splitting water into hydrogen or oxygen and using that hydrogen as a storage vector. Then I went to Princeton. I did the same sort of research, came back to my home country, which is Pakistan. I am now working in a university as an assistant professor, and I had a research center focusing on blockchain sponsored by the largest bank in the country. So that's a very brief background of what I do.
And where'd you get your doctorate in? Was it at
Yeah, so
Princeton?
I I did my master's and PhD from the University of Tokyo. So I stayed in Japan for a few years, and then lived in your country as well for about I think back in 2016, 17. Yeah.
And then how did you end up being a professor teaching about energy? And how does that relate to being head of the largest research group in blockchain in Pakistan? Those two don't necessarily align directly. So how
Yeah,
did this
that
come to be?
that that's a very common question that I get because on the face of it, it doesn't look as if they both match. So it's an interesting story. When I came back to Pakistan, I was basically an experimentalist, but my major in during my bachelor's was in computers. So I was basically majored in computers during my bachelor's, worked on energy side during my grad school, and and I could say that I was prepared for both areas. So when I came back, I thought that setting up my experimental lab is going to take some time. That's number one. Number two, what I thought was that now that I've entered into a university and research was my passion, and that's why I joined a university. I thought to myself, what does the future of energy look like in the next 50 years, 100 years, and so on? So there are three things. Number one, we know as a matter of fact that we are transitioning to a renewable energy future. Now, energy sources which are renewable, such as solar, such as wind, even hydro, they're all very cyclical in the sense that the time of the day or the time of the year or the weather, they all have impact on its production using these different mechanisms out there that we have for renewable energy. So there is a problem which is that we'll have intermittent supply. We need to have some sort of an energy mechanism for storage so that we can um, store the excess energy and then use it in times of need. That's aspect number one. The second aspect is that 50 years from now, the energy uh, sector is going to look a lot different. Why? Because we are going to transition from centralized large energy production power stations to small microgrids. Now, for example, if you have a solar panel on your home, this means that you're a small energy producer. And in the next 50 years, what we perceive is that uh, right now we have a physical infrastructure of the energy grid. In about 50 years, we are going to have a communication layer on top of that physical layer. And that communication layer means that we are going to have a smart grid, which will have IoTs, with which we'll be able to analyze data and basically use a computing mechanism to interact with different entities, different production houses. This means that to optimize energy grids, we would need some sort of a peer-to-peer trading mechanism. So I connected the dots and I thought that I already have a background in energy, but the future of energy requires us to work on with electronics and computers as well. And blockchain was the perfect solution to account for all the peer-to-peer trading that we need in the future to optimize and make the energy grid more efficient. So blockchain basically is very technology agnostic, but I thought to myself that this is one way in which I can overlap with my energy interests and build the infrastructure for the future. So that was my chain of thought on why I proceeded towards a certain area.
What was your introduction to blockchain? Was it just deduced from we need a small microgrid of different energies talking to each other, different
Yeah, so
grids?
I always had an interest in crypto because crypto had become very popular back in 2021 when there was another cycle, a hype cycle, and the prices went up. So I already had an interest in crypto. And when I started to study crypto, I understood that the underlying technology is blockchain. So I mean, it was very difficult to straight on apply for fundings and to convince students and your department and university to, make sense of working with energy and blockchain at the same time. So what I did was that I started working on small projects with my students, focusing on blockchain, um, using decentralized ledgers to use them in particular applications revolving around fintech, because fintech was popular, and that's how the largest bank in the country came to know that I'm doing such stuff in using blockchain and finance. And then that story progressed, in which they sponsored me to build certain applications for them, using blockchain, because they also believe that blockchain is the future and they need to be prepared for it. So it was kind of an organic story in which I one thing led to another, and I ended up getting a big grant to establish a research center in blockchain.
And just to go back for a second and touch on your 2 points of renewable energy and smaller microgrids for energy. You said renewables and named, solar, wind. You left out nuclear. You don't see nuclear as a path forward for small energy grids?
No, absolutely. I'm a big proponent of nuclear, but nuclear is a very uh, is slightly a controversial subject. Although I had a graduate course. I was teaching a graduate course this semester on hydrogen energy storage and other alternate energy resources, and I made the case that nuclear has is a great um, vertical to meet the future, the energy demands of our future. So I'm all for nuclear. There are some political connotations to it. There are some controversies, things like what happened in Chernobyl or what happened in Fukushima in Japan back in 2011, etc. But I think I personally, on a personal level, think that nuclear is just as good. Um, Although the good part about nuclear is that maybe it might not be possible to power the whole world using nuclear only, number one. Number two, all the waste material that is going to be created, we need to have a sustainable solution to get, rid of it. That is, I think, where this is one sector, specifically talking about the nuclear waste on how to get rid of it, is what I think we are lacking. But other than that, I think nuclear is a good option.
And then the small microgrids, is that the equivalent of decentralizing the energy grid? How do you see that playing out in the future compared to what the current energy infrastructure looks like?
Yeah, so even today, I'll give you an example of Pakistan and other developing countries as well. And I know this the same is happening in many states of the US, that people are starting to, use their own solar panels. So essentially, what we're doing is we're making an energy production house. Um, uh, we're producing energy. Every house is producing energy. So we are acting, or those houses are acting as independent power producers. And we might have or in let's take for example your house. If you're producing energy, you might not need it at certain points of day when you're out working or when you're not at home, and you can use that energy and actually sell it to your neighbor or somebody living down the block. And I think that's where the future of energy lies, in which individuals like you and me will be able to trade energy, and use it as an investment tool. And I think that's how we'll be able to optimize and efficiently use the and improve the current energy infrastructure.
Okay, so that's where the blockchain comes into the energy space, is the
Yeah. So
tradability
in order
of
to
the.
do so, blockchain allows you to the perfect way. So because blockchain has smart contracts, and contracts, I mean, selling and buying is a form of a contract in which one party agrees to sell, the other party agrees to buy it at a certain price. What blockchain allows us to make sure that it becomes automated. It is trustless. You don't need to trust the other party. It is immutable. When two parties agree on something, they don't have to go back, and malicious actor cannot unilaterally change the terms of the agreement. So there are certain advantages how blockchain can help to basically improve this trading between different individuals and entities.
And on a related topic to blockchain, Bittensor. That's how we came to know each other. What is Bittensor
Yeah.
solving in your eyes? What is the problem Bittensor solves? And why is solving that problem so revolutionary?
Yeah. So I remember a French philosopher, I think his name was René Descartes. He coined the term cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, which meant that, the fact that one can think is the proof of our existence and our consciousness. What does thinking imply? That means that we have a certain intellect, we have a certain intelligence code. And the very fact that intelligence, the commodity of intelligence, is what dictates or which basically authenticates that we exist and that we are conscious, that's such a powerful narrative that um, anything that is trying to democratize, build upon, improve intelligence is revolutionary. And that's what, that was the reason why I sort of got interested in BitTensor in the first place.
And this interest in Bittensor grew to a point which you co-founded one of the first compute subnets on Bittensor. Why is decentralized compute as a whole so important?
Well, um, in my personal opinion, the two most important aspects of artificial intelligence are data and compute. There are other aspects as well. I can talk about them, how to kind of differentiate or distinguish artificial intelligence into modular form. But I think the two most important aspects is data, on which the intelligence is trained, and the second thing, the most important thing, is compute to process all that data. And since these are the two basic ingredients of building upon, improving upon intelligence or artificial intelligence, I thought that one of those two need to be solved within Bit10, and that's why one of the first subnets that were established, I co-founded and developed a compute subnet, which was basically providing computing power to allow machine learning models to process data and then to make predictions. Now that's the compute aspect. The decentralized aspect is just as important, because right now, uh, since if we can agree that compute is such an important commodity in the era of AI, we cannot afford it to have it centralized. We cannot afford to have three or four major entities to monopolize this hugely impactful aspect of artificial intelligence. So AI basically allows, decentralized compute basically allows not just only to fill that gap for or that need for excess compute to process all that data for machine learning algorithms, but it also actually allows individuals and businesses to use their idle power and be incentivized and to be able to earn some money back for providing that compute. So that was my rationale for why I went for decentralized compute in the first place. Because A, compute is extremely important, and B, you can we don't want it to be monopolized by a few entities. Number one. Number two, we have a lot of computing power lying around. Even our cell phones, smartphones, computers, laptops, so on, all can be basically used to earn us back some money, and the only way possible is through um, a decentralized compute network where there is no barrier to entry. Any individual or entity like you and me can just plug in our compute and start making money off of it. It's basically about democratizing access and accessibility to individuals to basically provide that idle compute lying around their home.
And how would you consider this compute sector the transition to decentralized compute? How would you describe the progression?
Yeah, so I think that as a co-founder myself, there are certain aspects of decentralization which have not yet There are certain problems that we have not been able to solve yet because the sector is too early. I think scalability is one major issue. For example, the biggest problem that I came across was people lying about what kind of compute they're providing to the network, and how do you make sure that what an individual is claiming to be is actually the processing power. So because it's very easy to kind of fake it, and to be able to authenticate the different entities or nodes on a network that are providing compute, and making sure that there are no malicious actors, and making sure that the the specs that they are claiming are actually accurate. So problems like these, the scalability issues, and authenticating and making sure that everything is working fine is something that is much easier to do on a centralized network as compared to a decentralized network where there is no single owner, and where you're basically just trying to build a platform where different individuals can provide access, and then there's the other part of individuals or entities or nodes that are trying to make sure that what the other party is claiming is true or not. So I think we're too early right now, but we're getting there, and the decentralized compute market is going to grow exponentially over the next few years. I think in the next about 8 to 9 years, uh, more than 10% of the market share would be with the decentralized within the compute market. More than 10% is going to be um, for of the decentralized compute uh, markets in companies.
And like you said, with decentralized compute, the hardest problem there is verifying the compute people claim they have and are saying, hey, I have this compute to offer. Come use it, come buy it, come rent it, whatever. How have you seen
Yeah.
solutions on Bittensor and outside of Bittensor, whether it be specific subnets or outside of Bittensor, like something like the Akash network? How do these solutions address that problem?
Yeah, so it's basically what you can say. I mean, we can basically compare it to the proof of work that Bitcoin had introduced. We basically use something similar in which we throw problems towards a certain compute, and then the time in which it's able to solve it basically gives us the answer on whether the specs that are mentioned are actually there or not. So that's we are able to solve it, but it's a hard task, and we are trying to improve and build upon it. Now, specifically talking about the subnets within Bittensor and outside, I think it's just about the fact that uh, platforms like Render and Akash have been out there for many more years as compared to the subnets on Bittensor. The subnets like 27, 51, 12, they are much earlier. They're much younger as compared to Akash and Render. That means that the technologies or the platforms or the architectures being used or being developed by Render and Akash are slightly ahead as compared to that of subnets within Bittensor. For example, Akash, I think, had leased around their computes 187,000 times a few months ago since their creation. Compare that to the subnets within Bittensor. I think all of them combined haven't reached that point. But what I do know is that the acceleration is quite fast, and it's probably in the next year or maybe within a year, the subnets working on providing compute infrastructure, providing decentralized compute within Bittensor are going to become bigger in terms of revenue, in terms of the number of devices available, in terms of the total computing power available for renting. That would become much bigger or higher than those that are being provided by other layer ones decentralized compute infrastructures like Render, like Akash, like and so on.
And compute is just one part of AI. And you told me before that blockchain has two primary applications: decentralizing AI and tokenizing real world assets. Why do you believe these are the two most important use cases for blockchain technology?
Yeah, so yeah, actually that's an interesting question because I get this question quite often. As a researcher who's trying to ask for funds and trying to convince the bank and other entities to fund them for research in blockchain, and the most common question is that blockchain is a solution that is looking for a problem. I disagree with it. I think that the two major applications: one, yes, decentralization of AI, and two, the real world asset tokenization. Now, allow me a few seconds to talk about. Number one, I do believe that artificial intelligence is extremely important. Intelligence itself is very important. The very fact that we can think is the reason why we know that there's a Grant and there's a Fahad talking to each other. And that's basically a proof of our existence and our consciousness. And so that is the most important aspect of humanity. And we cannot allow this most important discovery, uh, that IE of artificial intelligence, to be monopolized by a few entities like Google's or like OpenAI's. So it's very important to make that decentralized, so that individuals like you and me can become a part of it. There's no central owner. There's no central entities controlling the data, the machine learning models, so on and so forth. The second most important application, in my opinion, or which I believe is even more important than decentralization of AI, is the tokenization of real world assets. Now, to just give you a perspective, there are about $867 trillion worth of assets out there that can be tokenized. In the year 2024, the growth in in real world asset tokenization was 85%. Right now, excluding stablecoins, it stands at um, around $15 billion. But analysts expect, even World Economic Forum expects, that by 2030, and that's just 5 years ahead, the total tokenization market is going to reach $10 trillion. Now, there are different targets. I mean, some claim it's going to be 10 trillion, the others claim that it's going to be 16, 30, whatever, but that's trillion with a T. So from $15 billion, billion with a B, going to 16 or even $10 trillion, what's that? That's about
A thousand
600
X.
times growth in the next 5 years. I think the total AI market is going to be around uh, somewhere between $4 to $6 trillion in the next 6 7 years. Tokenization, on the other hand, uh, every analyst believes, and all the reports and World Economic Forum, Davos, Chainlink, so on and so forth, everybody is claiming that it's going to be much, much bigger. That if that market is going to be much bigger, so in my humble opinion, that sector is much more important, because finance is something that we all deal with every day. Um, uh, uh, but it's not in our control. It's in the control of few entities that are called banks or financial institutions. But the tokenization of assets allows to improve the efficiency, cut the costs. Banks are still operating on legacy softwares, and incurring we have to incur intermediary charges. Um, and then there are physical processes involved in carrying out those cumbersome verification processes. We can basically remove them all using blockchain to tokenize all the world assets out there. I mean, the debt and the bond market itself is about more than $500 trillion. Real estate is a few hundred trillion. Commodities is tens of trillions. So I mean, there's a huge market, and all these trillions is trillion with a T, just to give you the perspective. They give you a sense of the enormity of how big the market is. And I believe that it's going to be even bigger than artificial intelligence market. So that's why I feel that blockchain's main two applications are going to be the decentralization of AI. Reason being that AI is the most transformative technology. I mean, it's one of the most important discoveries of mankind. Um, and it needs to be democratized. Every individual needs to have ownership of it, and it should not be confined to a few individuals, or a few business owners, a few S&P 500 companies. It should be owned by by all of us. And the second most important, which is I believe even more important, is the tokenization of real world assets, because there are hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of assets that are kind of run by a few banks or financial institutions, or by centralized entities or governments. And blockchain allows to democratize to it. And Grant, just allow me, I think there's another application as well. And I think this might not be a popular opinion, but I think even meme coins is a great application of blockchain. And allow me uh, to explain why. Because,
Yes.
I
Please
mean,
explain why.
compare meme coins is a bigger market than AI. Meme coins is, I think, even a bigger market right now than DeFi, if I'm not mistaken. But it's somewhere around there, $100 billion plus of meme coins out there. And why is it more? Why is it more than two times bigger than the AI market? Um, that's because there's a sense of community. There's a sense of belonging. It's fun. People want to become part of a certain tribe or a group to have certain identity, and I think that's what blockchain allows um, via creation of meme coins with which people can revolve around a certain theme or a meme and have a sense of belonging. But so in my opinion, even meme coins is a great application of blockchain. But the two most important, as I mentioned, AI decentralization and tokenization of real world assets.
For an academic like yourself to bring up meme coins, I'm very
I
surprised
know.
by it, and I feel
Yeah, I know. I
um
agree.
in mapping these real world assets like the real estate markets, the bond markets, traditional stock market assets and commodities, what are the biggest difficulties in that mapping to the blockchain of these assets?
Yeah, I think that the biggest problem right now is regulation. If we have prudent regulations, I think it would become much more easier to verify the digital identities of all those real world assets. I think that's one aspect of it. Blockchain allows to build a trustless system and to be able to trade, but the very fact that the verification of that real world asset actually belonging, which we call the oracle problem. How do blockchain or databases know that there's this physical thing out there? To be able to verify that is, I think, a problem that still exists. But with regulatory frameworks coming in place and with IoTs, becoming a part of our future, I think we're going to be able to solve uh, this verification problem and making sure that there's compliance and there's certain benchmarks through which we can play the game.
So again, you think the biggest problem there will be the verification that the asset actually exists. The same way in decentralized compute, it's verifying the compute actually exists and is available. How are those
Yeah,
two
yeah,
similar?
yeah. Every so decent. What's the major advantage of having a centralized entity? That's the centralized owner or entity basically gives that verification, makes sure that everything is in order. If somebody claims that this compute has a 40 GB RAM, he can physically verify that, or he can make sure that he's the monitor, he's the one checking each and individual and making sure that only you know uh, verified compute is becoming part of a larger network. In decentralization, where there's no owner, the problem is that anyone when you lower the barrier of entry, then malicious actors can also become a part of that network, and we need to have mechanisms to ensure to keep a check, which we call basically consensus mechanisms to make sure that there's consensus that no malicious actor becomes part of the larger decentralized network. And I think that's where what the biggest problem lies that will take time to evolve and improve.
And for consensus mechanisms, the Yuma consensus was the first of its kind in a blockchain type of form. Was that something that when you first found out about Yuma consensus immediately clicked for you? Or was it something that took a little bit more time to understand the implications of it?
So I think most of the people still can't understand what Yuma consensus is, and what Yuma consensus actually claims is it's a very difficult problem. So essentially, what Yuma means, what the consensus is that intelligence is going to gauge other intelligence. This is the in a crux what Yuma consensus is all about. Um, and there are some problems associated with this ideology, that that intelligent entity trying to gauge other ML machine learning models need to be more intelligent than that. And what if the other entities become the machine learning models being provided by the miners become more intelligent than the uh, than those which are trying to gauge it. So to answer your particular question, yes, that is what really attracted me. I mean, it was a powerful idea. The fact that you use intelligence to gauge intelligence, but again, it comes with a lot of problems, what a lot of issues. I can talk about this in a lot of detail, but um, in its simplest form, I think the idea is so powerful that yes, it would attract any conscious sapient being towards this platform that is Bittensor.
What are the biggest challenges of intelligence judging other intelligence? Are there any bottlenecks there?
Well, actually, there are many. Um, and it's a difficult problem to solve. How do you make sure? I'll give you, I mean, I'll give you a simpler example. For example, when you were a 5-year-old, you had a certain intellect. What if you were you were taught the theory of relativity? You wouldn't be able to gauge it properly because, your intellect had not developed to a point where you could understand those complicated concepts. Similarly, you can use the same analogy for BitTensor as well. That what if the machine learning models or the intelligence being provided on different sublets reach a point where it would be difficult to even gauge them on how good that particular intelligence is. And again, this is a very subjective concept. So let's just take subnet one, or rather the before the subnets, we just used to have a simple bit tensor network where um, the LLM models used to provide a simple, concise summary of the text. And we had to gauge, I mean, so the validators had to gauge how good that summary was, but there were certain limitations on how to gauge what a good summary of a text is. And this is something that can be very subjective and can be very hard to solve. So, so the biggest bottleneck, in my opinion, is to make sure that the contextualization of intelligence is on the same level. Number one. Number two, that the validation mechanism also continuously improves to make sure that they are able to gauge what intelligence is. But again, this is a very general topic because then we'll have to talk about specifically about different subnets and what they're trying to do and what problems are associated with validating those particular value that is being provided or offered by the miners on that subnet. So now we've evolved to a point on Bittensor that we can't, generalize everything. We'll have to talk specifically about different subnets and yeah, take it from there.
The problem of judging the value created by these subnets at a subnet level is the problem that led to the creation of DTAL, a market-based approach for valuing those subnets. What are your thoughts on DTAL, and what do you think that will do for Bittensor, and how does that revolutionize the concept that Bittensor is trying to approach or solve?
Yeah, I mean, so using AI as a commodity and different aspects of AI as a commodity and using the market to basically gauge how good they are, that essentially means having user face user targeted applications for individual users to kind of gauge how good that service being provided is, and will I be willing to pay certain amount for it. And I think that's where the whole, I mean, the how great and how brilliant subnet idea is, that there would be many different subnets working on many different aspects of AI, and they would be working and racing towards building user facing applications in which individuals can come and actually pay to get those services. And how good the services are would determine what the prices are going to be, and that's how different subnets are going to either survive or just perish. And I think that that's just enormously intelligent and brilliant to basically have a free market system for an AI marketplace.
And you see that loop of directly tying to the end user in terms of the amount of money they can capture is the value that will be judged.
I think that is a good parameter to judge how well these services are, because in a free market economy, the only company or entity or a startup or subnet that is going to survive is if they are providing a good service that people are actually willing to take to rent that service or use that service and actually pay for it. And I think that's a brilliant idea in the sense that that's going to be a very powerful factor to determine how good a particular service and particular application is um, within the Bittensor ecosystem.
Do you see the Bittensor ecosystem leading towards or contributing to the creation of the AGI? Is an AGI achievable? Is that something that you think about?
No, I mean, it's a topic that everybody likes to think about. What is the AGI? I mean, let's just try to decipher what AGI is. So, artificial general intelligence is basically replicating human intelligence to have some sort of consciousness, to have some sort of a moral compass, to be able to distinguish not just one aspect, but all the aspects out there. I mean, being able to make intelligent decisions and to understand all kind of different scenarios. So how I take it is, replicating what or mimicking human intelligence. And I think, yes, we are going to get there sometime. I remember of the author and researcher Mogadet, who said that the three inevitables of AI, and one of them was that AI is going to happen, and number two, there is going to be a billion times more intelligent than humans. And what, in my opinion, what that means is that AI is going to become smart enough to have a consciousness, to have some kind of a moral compass, to have opinions on all different aspects. And the second aspect, is it achievable on BitTensor? I think if all those subnets I mean, if the various subnets, and I don't know, there's a lot of ideas of subnets that are still coming in, and we're built, and now it's going to be a plethora of subnets being created. If all these different subnets start to interact with each other, uh, and um, and and build a common intelligent mind, so to speak, in which they'll be able to talk between different subnets, survive and thrive on due to each other. Then I think that time can come in which we'll be able um, to achieve a conscious, artificially intelligent brain. But these topics are far more complicated, and I know that it's difficult to gauge them right now, because my interpretation of where Bittensor is and how the subnets are functioning and what those different subnets are doing is probably going to be different from somebody else, or from some listener who doesn't know what artificial intelligence is. But so, to just make things simpler, yes, AGI is achievable. B, can Bittensor do it? Absolutely. If there's any, decentralized entity that can do it, I think Bittensor is that revolutionary technology that can make sure that we become, artificial intelligence becomes intelligent enough to actually be able to gain consciousness, and you know, and that would, in my opinion, be the definition of artificial general intelligence.
You used one word in there that I've never heard anyone use when speaking about AGI, and that was morals. I've never heard anyone use the word morals in the context of AGI. You believe a AGI system would have to have morals?
Yeah, I think so. So, let's take an example. Um, Hitler thought killing millions of people was fine. He had his own reasons. So his moral compass said that, it was a decision that what I'm doing is not wrong or not bad. We believe that it was wrong. So there's a difference of opinion. Our moral compasses, our ability to comprehend or distinguish what is right from wrong, is what I believe is a moral compass. And if you have an intelligent mind, and if you're built or developed in a certain way, then you can have a different interpretation of what is right, what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is, between good and evil. And 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 that's what I think, that if AI, artificial intelligence, is developed to a point where it's going to start making opinions about different aspects of life, then eventually that means that it's going to have some opinion about right and wrong, good and bad. And that's, in my opinion, what a moral compass is. We might not agree with it, but you know, an AI might think that, I have a different opinion of what is good and what is bad.
When you apply that concept to AI models, could you claim that the morals are just a reflection of bias in the data that was used to train those models?
Absolutely. So I think two of the biggest problems that we have seen in AI, the biggest problems are, one is hallucination, and all the large companies have seen this, where there are certain models that provide incorrect or inaccurate or create information out of thin air. Um, so that is an aspect that exists and that we know that there is. Then there are emergent properties in which AI basically do things that they were not trained to do. Um, and 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 why it does what it is doing has to do with how it was trained and what kind of data it was trained upon. So yes, the fact that how you train them and what kind of data is provided to them has an impact on how it responds to different scenarios and situations. And definitely that might end up being um, one factor to influence how they perceive, how artificial intelligence would perceive a certain scenario.
Would it be fair to say AGI is achieved once a model is able to mimic human outputs and be indistinguishable from human outputs on all five of the human senses,
Yeah, I think so.
and
I think so. So
not just not just language, like with Chat GPT?
yeah, so I think so. If you compare with other senses, I think the ability or the efficiency of the sensors that provide the machine learning models with those certain with certain information about the environment is just as important, because it does not remain confined to the machine learning model or how well it's been able to develop and grow, but it has also to do with the the equipment or with the electronics or with the sensors that are providing it with the information. So there might be certain barriers or certain limitations of that sensors, but if we can agree, or if we can um, uh, assume that all the sensors that are providing that machine learning model or with that artificial intelligence system are just as good as human sensors, like our sensors are our ears, our hands, our touch, our tongue, and so on, our eyes. If the electronic systems are just as good, then I believe that AI systems would not just be able to be comparable to human minds, but will actually be able to, kind of be much better than those um, carbon-based
What in
intelligence.
yeah, what significance does it have that we're able to track essentially other senses outside of the human senses, like sonar, or radio waves, or geomagnetic data, those type of things? What effects will that have on AI development in the future?
Grant, I think I lost you for a second, so could you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, I think this is cut out for a little bit too. The ability to go beyond human senses and track data beyond human senses, like radio waves, geomagnetic data, sonar, those type of things. How does that affect the possibilities of artificial intelligence in the future?
Great question, Grant. So, in my opinion, we already agree. We can agree that there are sensors out there that we have, humans have built sensors that can, analyze data that is not um, humans themselves. These physical bodies of ourselves are not able to track. So we already have have the equipment for that. And once that data is fed into the machine learning models or AI, artificial intelligence systems, frankly, I don't think there's anyone who can predict what's going to happen. Even now, I think ChatGPT 4 has reached an IQ of 155 or somewhere. That means in the next 5 years, the artificial intelligence systems are going to be much more intelligent. And once we couple them with other sensory data that even physical bodies like ours are unable to receive, and using electronic systems to basically provide them with that data, and have that plethora and vast amount of sea of data out there, and then try to predict how intelligent AI is going to be. I don't think that's possible for any human being to do so, because we have never been there. And I think that's uncharted territory. And in my humble opinion, a little bit scary, because it's unpredictable how well they are going to, or how intelligent they are going to become, these silicon based artificial intelligence systems.
And to tie that back to Bittensor, where would you see the most potential for Bittensor in this future?
Well, I think as we've discussed, I mean, BitTensor's USP, its unique selling point, is the democratization of artificial intelligence. AI itself is very technology agnostic. I mean, it's just a tool which you can basically use to make decisions or predict for all the different fields out there. You can use AI in virtually every field. So I think the application of BitTensor, the significance or importance of BitTensor, is being able to democratize that hugely important area of artificial intelligence within AI, or where to use a particular or which particular application would AI be used for, or which is going to be more um, beneficial or more important or more significant. I think every particular sector. I don't want to generalize. Almost every particular sector out there is going to get improved due to AI. BitTensor is just a tool which is trying to make sure that the access to it, or the ability to be a part of it, is not confined to a few individuals, but to the whole of humanity. And I think that's where its importance is. It still is, and it's going to become even more important in the future, just because of the enormity, or of the significance that AI is going to achieve in the coming few years.
And are there any specific sectors that you think can see an outsized benefit by utilizing the tool that is BitTensor?
Again, um I mean, I have a certain bias. I think compute itself is hugely important, where BitTensor is going to play a very pivotal part. I think the medical diagnostic and drug discovery system is another aspect which I feel is going to be hugely beneficial But again, the underlying assertion is that those importance is because of its decentralization. And so I know you want a particular sector, but I don't have a particular sector in mind. I feel that, the underlying importance of Bittensor lies not that it's working on all the different aspects of AI, but the fact that it's working in a decentralized manner. It's providing a platform, it's providing an avenue to have decentralization, which is the most critical and important part.
And going down the decentralized path, assume we're in a world, everything gets tokenized, everything's on chain now, everything's on blockchain, everything's decentralized. What does this in game mean once everything is in that decentralized on chain world? How does that environment look like?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, that's an ideal world where there will be no centralizations and the corruptions and the inefficiencies that are associated with centralizations. That would be a dream world where individuals would have rights and would have ownership of their own data or on their own finance, as compared to some central bank or a central government or a central entity. So I think the it's very difficult for me to see that world happening because there are major players like governments, like financial institutions that are going to lose, that are on the verge of losing a lot if that you know ideal digital world starts to exist, and they're going to make sure that um, uh, there are roadblocks to that pathway. But I think in principle we as humanity would have ownership of every aspect of life, which right now is being controlled by others. And there are certain inefficiencies and corruptions and sluggishness that is associated with those centralized entities that are controlling the different aspects of our life.
And you feel this in game is not achievable. It's just a idealistic ideal that can never actually be realized, and there will always be centralization.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question because do we really want a fully digital world, or do we actually want some checks or some balance out there by central entities? So I think I relate this to the blockchain trilemma that, decentralization, security, and scalability cannot be achieved at the same time. So you can achieve two, but not the third one. And I think if we are in a scenario where we cannot achieve scalability, decentralization, and security at the same time, then there would be certain aspects that need to be controlled by a central entity to make sure that there's a level playing field and to make sure there are rules and regulations and boundaries and checks and balances. So until we solve the blockchain trilemma, um, uh, certain aspects of having certain checks might not be such a bad idea.
Okay. And to wrap this up, I'll just ask you, what advice do you have for people looking to get involved in the blockchain space, whether it be through the research front, the development front, investment front, whatever avenue they're in? What would be your advice to those people approaching decentralization and blockchain technologies?
Yeah, so I think my best advice would be to do proper homework, not go with the with all with all the noise that's happening. It's very difficult to go astray. It's very important to do your homework, make up your mind on why you're making a certain decision, whether it's in making investment or whether gaining a skill to do a certain aspect of work on a certain aspect of blockchain. It's important to have a clear thought of mind on why you're choosing a particular path, and then just taking a leap of faith and you know taking it forward, because um, I guess that's the most general advice that I can give. Just do your homework, be smart, don't just listen to the noise. You should have a clarity of thought when you enter this arena.
Fahad, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
You too, man. Thank you for having me.